1311. The Atlantic Ocean. West African coastline. The emperor of the richest kingdom on earth is standing on a platform above the water watching his fleet disappear. 2,000 ships. Gone. Sent to find what lay beyond the horizon. Only one came back. The captain said there was a current out there. A whirlpool that swallowed everything. The emperor did not accept this. He built more ships. 3,000 vessels. The largest fleet any African monarch had ever assembled. He appointed his deputy to govern in his absence. And then he sailed west, into the Atlantic, with 3,000 ships, and was never seen again. His name was Abubakar Keita Roman II, Emperor of Mali. The deputy he left behind inherited the greatest empire on earth, and had absolutely no idea that history would remember him as the richest human being who ever lived. His name was Musa Keita. And what he did next broke the global economy, and was then buried by the people who benefited from burying it. Before we follow Musa across the Sahara, we need to understand the world he was operating in. Because Western history tells the story of the 14th century as a story of European suffering. The Black Death, the 100 Years, war, feudal collapse, famine, darkness. That story is true for Europe. What that story does not tell you is what was happening simultaneously on the other side of the world. In West Africa, the 14th century was not a dark age. It was a golden one. While Europe was dying of plague, the Mali Empire was the largest political entity on earth. 1.3 million square kilometers, stretching from the Atlantic coast to the borders of modern Nigeria. An empire that contained within its borders more wealth than any other kingdom in the known world. Not rumored wealth, not mythological wealth. Documented, traded, and globally circulated wealth. Half of the world's gold came from Mali. Every gold coin in Egypt, Venice, Morocco, and Genoa. The coins that funded the Crusades, that adorned European cathedrals, that paid European armies, contained metal that came from the ground inside the Mali Empire. The men who dug it were its citizens. The man who controlled it was its emperor. And in 1312, that man was Musa Keita. Musa did not inherit the throne in the conventional way. He was appointed regent, deputy emperor, by his predecessor Abubakar Roman II, who became consumed by a question that no one in his position had ever seriously asked. What is on the other side of the Atlantic? The account of what happened next was recorded by the Arab-Egyptian scholar Shihab al-Umari, who interviewed Cairn officials who had spoken with Musa directly. Abubakar first sent 200 ships west. One returned. The captain described a violent, swirling current that consumed everything. Abubakar sent 3,000 ships. He went himself. He never came back. Some historians have speculated that Abubakar's fleet reached the Americas 181 years before Columbus. There are indigenous accounts from the Caribbean of encounters with dark-skinned people arriving in large boats from the east. Whether he made it or not, he never returned. And so Musa Keita, his deputy, became the 9th Mansa of Mali. He inherited an empire bursting with potential. He was about to add the one thing it was missing, a global reputation. To understand what Musa was working with, you need to understand the mechanics of Mali's wealth. It was not just gold, though the gold was extraordinary. It was the position. Mali sat between two things the medieval world could not live without. To the south, the gold fields of Bambuk and Biur. To the north, the salt mines of Tagaza. Salt sounds ordinary. In the pre-modern world it was not. Salt preserved food. Salt sustained the body. In the sub-Saharan heat, without salt, you died. Mali was the unavoidable tollgate between the gold of the south and the salt of the north. Every transaction between the two passed through imperial hands. Every caravan paid imperial tax. The gold fields were managed by specialist guilds. Raw metal flowed directly into the imperial treasury. The emperor decided how much gold entered the Trans-Saharan network and at what price. He didn't just have gold. He controlled the supply. Economists who have attempted to calculate Musa's net worth in contemporary terms arrive at figures that don't quite translate. Some say $400 billion. Some say the question is unanswerable, because he wasn't just wealthy, he was the source. The distinction matters. Bezos and Musk own companies. Musa owned the mine. In 1324, 12 years into his reign, Musa made a decision. He would make the Hajj. The pilgrimage to Mecca required of every Muslim who was physically and financially able. Musa was financially able, but this was never just a religious journey. It was the most sophisticated act of geopolitical branding in medieval history. For centuries, the Islamic world had been receiving Mali's gold through North African middlemen without fully understanding where it came from. Musa intended to correct that. He would appear in Cairo, in Mecca, in every court and trading city along the route, and he would make it impossible for anyone to ever again claim ignorance of what the Mali Empire was. The preparation took years. What assembled on the road out of Niani in the spring of 1324 was not a caravan. It was a moving city. 60,000 people. Let that number exist for a moment. 60,000 human beings crossing the Sahara Desert. 4,000 miles. The most hostile terrain on earth. At the front, 500 enslaved guards dressed in fine Persian silk, each carrying a 6-pound staff of solid gold. Not gold-plated, gold. Behind them, 12,000 personal servants, each one clothed and equipped at imperial expense. Behind them, the baggage train, hundreds of camels, each carrying between 100 and 300 pounds of raw gold dust. Total gold in transit, estimated at 71,000 pounds. And somewhere in the center of all of it, one man on a horse, dressed in embroidered Alexandrian silk, wearing more gold than most European kingdoms held in their entire treasuries. Every Friday, wherever they were in the desert, the caravan stopped. A portable mosque was erected from wooden poles and woven textiles. Musa prayed. Then the city moved again. The logistics of feeding and watering 60,000 people across 4,000 miles of desert required a mastery of geography and supply chain management that rivaled any military campaign in history. Musa understood the Sahara. Previous Malian rulers had attempted the crossing and been killed by bandits. His heavily militarized caravan announced something important. Mali now owned the desert too. The caravan arrived outside Cairo in July 1324. Cairo was the capital of the Mamluk Sultanate, the largest, wealthiest, most sophisticated city in the Mediterranean world, a city of 1 million people. A city not easily impressed. 60,000 armed strangers carrying literal tons of gold camped outside its walls and requested an audience with the Sultan. The first problem was protocol. Mamluk court demanded prostration. Every visiting dignitary kissed the floor before the Sultan. Musa refused. He was the ruler of an empire larger and wealthier than Egypt. He would bow to no mortal king. The diplomatic standoff held for days. Then Musa found his solution. He entered the court. He bent to kiss the floor. And he announced, loudly, to everyone present, that he was prostrating himself before Allah, the creator of the universe. Not before the Sultan. The Sultan got his visual. Musa kept his dignity. Two monarchs who understood power found a way to share a room. Then Musa opened his treasury. He gave gold to the poor in the streets, to officials, to merchants, to mosques. He bought goods at prices so far above market value that sellers stood in the bazaar weeping. He was not performing generosity. He genuinely did not understand that he could break something by being too generous. But he did. The injection of 71,000 pounds of gold into the Cairo market crashed the value of gold across the entire eastern Mediterranean. Inflation spread along the trade routes. To Medina, to Mecca, to the Levant. Prices of basic goods collapsed into chaos. Merchants who had priced everything in gold found their gold was suddenly worth far less. Economists who have studied this event estimate the inflation lasted between 10 and 12 years. One man's religious pilgrimage destabilized the global economy for a decade. And then, in the detail history books almost always skip, Musa ran out of money. The wealthiest human being who ever lived, returning from Mecca, was broke. His wealth was geological, locked in the mines of Bambuk and Bure, not in his saddlebags. The saddlebags were empty. He went to the Cairo moneylenders, the men whose markets he had just destroyed. He borrowed money at punishing interest rates, the only rates available to a man whose spending had just wrecked the economy of the city he was borrowing in. He paid it back. Every coin, every interest charge. The Malian gold fields generated enough upon his return to clear the debt entirely. His empire's credit rating survived. But the image, the richest man in history borrowing money to get home, is one of the most human moments in any story this large. The gold Musa spent in Cairo was gone. What he carried home was more valuable. He recruited from every city he passed through. Scholars, jurists, poets, architects. He offered salaries no institution in the Islamic world could match. He was building something. The most famous of those he recruited was Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, an Andalusian poet and architect who had been exiled from Granada and was living in the Middle East. Al-Sahili agreed to come to Mali. He was paid, upon completion of his first commission, 12,000 mithqals of gold dust. For generations afterward, European colonial historians claim that Al-Sahili single-handedly invented West African monumental architecture. That he arrived and taught Africans how to build with bricks. This is a lie. Modern archaeological research has dismantled it completely. The Sudano-Sahelian architectural tradition, mud brick, organic, monumental, predated Al-Sahili's arrival by centuries. It was indigenous. It was sophisticated. It was already there. What Al-Sahili contributed was a synthesis. He introduced one specific innovation, the wooden beams, called Turon, embedded horizontally in the mud brick walls. They acted as seismic stabilizers. They provided built-in scaffolding for the annual replastering every rainy season required. One architectural refinement. Borrowed, adapted, integrated by Malian builders into their own tradition. The lie that Al-Sahili invented West African architecture was not a mistake. It was a colonial agenda. It said, anything sophisticated in Africa must have come from somewhere else. The mosque Al-Sahili designed with Malian builders, the Jingriber, completed in Timbuktu in 1327, is still standing today. Timbuktu. The word has become a synonym for the ends of the earth. From here to Timbuktu, meaning nowhere, the middle of nothing, beyond the beyond. The people who turned it into that phrase had clearly never been there. At its height, Timbuktu had a population of 100,000 people. That made it comparable to, or larger than, London, Paris, or any major European city of the era. At its center was a university. Not one building. A network of 3 mosque universities, Sankor, Jingriber, Sidi Yahya, that collectively housed 25,000 students. Oxford University had been open for over 200 years by Musa's time and enrolled far fewer students. The curriculum at Sankor covered Islamic jurisprudence and law, theology, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, geography, rhetoric, poetry. The libraries held between 400,000 and 800,000 manuscripts, not religious texts only, not scripture alone. Advanced treatises on optics, the mathematical properties of light and reflection. Written in 14th century West Africa. A text titled On the Obligations of Princes. A sophisticated framework for constitutional governance, the ethical duties and legal limitations of a ruler. One jurist wrote an extensive defense of a newly introduced commodity called tobacco, arguing carefully from Islamic jurisprudence that it was neither narcotic nor intoxicant and therefore permissible. This is a society engaged in legal debate about drug policy. In the 14th century, in West Africa, books were the ultimate status symbol of the Malian elite. One king is recorded purchasing a single dictionary for the price of 2 horses. A horse cost approximately what a small farm cost. He paid 2 of them for a dictionary, because in Timbuktu, knowledge was worth more than almost anything. Mansa Musa died around 1337. He was approximately 57 years old. He had ruled for 25 years. His brother, Mansa Suleiman, succeeded him and proved a capable ruler. In 1352, the great Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta visited the Malian court. His account survives. He wrote that a traveler could walk from one end of the Mali Empire to the other without fear of being robbed. He documented immense wealth, strict justice, a state that functioned, but the seeds of collapse were already in the soil. The empire had grown too large, the borders too long, the central authority too distant from the edges it was supposed to hold. Succession disputes fractured the Keita dynasty from within. The Mossi people attacked from the south. Tuareg nomads captured Timbuktu in 1433. To the east, the vassal state of Gao declared independence and became the foundation of the Songhai Empire. By 1500, the empire that had controlled half the world's gold had retreated to its original heartland. By 1610, it dissolved entirely. The Jingriber Mosque still stood. The manuscripts were still there, but the empire was gone. In 1375, a Jewish cartographer named Abraham Cresques completed the Catalan Atlas. It was the most important map of the medieval world. In the heart of West Africa, he painted a figure on a golden throne, holding a golden scepter, offering a golden orb to a trader on a camel. The caption read, "This black lord is called Musmeli. This king is the richest and noblest of all these lands due to the abundance of gold extracted from his lands." European monarchs displayed this map in their courts. Portuguese explorers launched expeditions down the African coast explicitly chasing the legend it depicted. The stated goal was to find the river of gold, the source of Malian wealth. They found it. And then they didn't trade with it. They stole from it. For 500 years. The story colonial Europe needed to tell was the story of a dark continent. Africa. Empty. Primitive. Waiting. Requiring European civilization to give it history. Mansa Musa's Mali Empire made that story impossible. A king who crashed the Egyptian economy by being too generous. A university with 25,000 students. 800,000 manuscripts. Treatises on optics and constitutional law. This is not a civilization that needed saving. This is a civilization that was thriving while the people who later claimed to have saved it were dying of plague. So the story was buried. The manuscripts were ignored. The $400 billion emperor became a trivia question. A fun fact. A viral statistic. Not a civilization. Not a warning. Not the truth. His predecessor sailed into the Atlantic with 3,000 ships and was never seen again. He inherited an empire and made it impossible to ignore. He walked 60,000 people across the Sahara and accidentally destroyed the Mediterranean economy by being too generous. He built a university that 25,000 students attended while Europe was burning heretics. He died peacefully, in his palace, at 57, at the head of the greatest empire on earth. And then the people who found his gold decided that his story was not a story worth telling. It is. This is Forgotten Africa. Subscribe, because they buried this. And we are standing